Hello, this is Father Rich. Here I am at the main office hallway of Our Lady of Peace. The door to the office here, right to my right, and the window here. And I'm in between two great shepherds of our church, Pope Francis over here, and Bishop Persico, the Bishop of the Diocese of Erie. Pope Francis is the one I thought of because the topic of our next essay for how the church has changed the world is one of our great popes and a great reformer in the church of the 11th century. The title of the essay is Hildebrand the Great. And Hildebrand was the first name of the baptized name of this pope, just like Jorge. Remember, Bergoglio is the name of the pope, but of course we all know him as Francis, that name that he took on. So this pope is Gregory the VII. And his, again, baptismal name was Hildebrand. He was born in Italy in the 11th century, as I mentioned. And the scene that they open the essay with is a dramatic scene. They say it's probably one of the most well-known and dramatic scenes of the Middle Ages, of the Pope Gregory being in a castle that was held by a woman by the name of Count Matilda, I believe, of Tuscany. She had a lot of influence in the church and really was in a positive way trying to help the similar goals as Pope Gregory the Seventh. And so there they were in the castle, and there came the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV walking in sackcloth and ashes up to the castle, seeking forgiveness by the Pope. The Pope had excommunicated him because he continued to ignore the Pope when it came to the naming of bishops and cardinals and leaders in the church. And as you remember, this was an issue several videos ago with St. Thomas Becket and the other saint from Norway. I forget his name off the top of my head. But this constant clash of this time of that was also in the 11th and 12th century, where there was this wrestling for control. The kings and the emperors wanted control of naming the leaders of the church so that they could manipulate the church and have it do what they wanted, versus the Pope, who wanted to have that control. And this was a constant tension for centuries. And so here Henry IV came repentant, and of course some may have said that the Pope should have not forgiven him or punished him or whatever, but of course Pope Gregory had mercy. He was a very holy man, known for his holiness. He would be eventually canonized, and so we now know him as Saint Pope Gregory the Seventh. And of course Henry IV, after he repented, he went back and started doing the same stuff all over. So Gregory actually ended up dying in exile, as wasn't unusual for the saints of these first 1,500 years of our church history, because of these constant conflicts between the secular powers and the spiritual powers, the religious powers. But he represents the reform. So they call this the investiture kind of controversy. There was a constant battle of who should invest the bishops and the leaders of the church, the popes or the emperors and the kings. And he also reformed the clergy. He was also the one, remember, until this time, celibacy was an optional discipline for the clergy. And he was one of the ones that really established it as a permanent discipline. He felt strongly that this call to celibacy should be one that we commit to as a church. And so we remember the second millennia of our church, that has been the expectation. And I believe it's a beautiful one, this idea of this singleness of heart, that priests are called to give themselves completely to the family of the church. And if they were trying to raise their own families as husbands and fathers, they would have a divided heart. So really allowing us to give our hearts fully to our spiritual family, the parish. So these were among many things that he sought to reform. The monasteries, this essay really talks about many of the spiritual leaders, unfortunately, were more worldly and really were giving themselves to worldly things, whether it be physical relationships or money and lands. And Pope Gregory the Seventh really sought to reform that, and was a huge step in the right direction for the church. And so they end the article actually talking about another Hildebrand who was a convert to the faith, his name being Dietrich von Hildebrand. And he was a philosopher of the the 20th century, died in 1977. He followed the likes of Husserl and Max Scheler, amongst others. And but he eventually would convert to Catholicism. He was stood up against Hitler in the 1900s in Germany. He eventually had to flee to the U.S. because of his persecution, and he would go on to be a professor here in the United States for many decades. But he would continue to be write strongly and stand against anti-Semitism, and as well as the sacrifice and the call to live out the Christian life, obviously in the Catholic Church eventually. So they end the article with this statement, which I think is a good way to end it. 2 burning brands. So brands meaning Hildebrand, Dietrich von Hildebrand, as well as Hildebrand, who became Pope St. Gregory the VII. The name actually means battle sword, Hildebrand. But he says 2 burning brands, afire with holy love, who will be the third? Hopefully we can all follow the example of these 2 great Hildebrands and continue to change the world through love. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great day and God bless.